Welcome to All Things Geekery, where we chat about those random topics like gaming, tech, and sci-fi and lore, and all the randomness in between. I'm Iogro.
And I'm Victus, and it's time for a little geeky chat. Real money transactions are threatening my love of Destiny. Interesting. What are you going to banter about? That's one thing I wonder about, or personally don't have any beef about, is when they include microtransactions and it's for cosmetic stuff.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge fan of cosmetic items in games. I think the game content and the story is more important to me than the way I look, to a certain degree, and it depends on the game. Lord of the Rings Online, they don't do a lot of cosmetics that you have to go buy. A lot of stuff you get. Gotta go grind for it. Different events and stuff you can go do gives you a lot. A lot of the console games and even a lot of the PC games outside of MMOs that I've played, I've seen that model come in where you have to go buy, say, a cosmetic pack and you get a whole outfit with it. And I think it's great. I think it's cool. It's a good way for companies to have a little bit of subsidized income come in. And I think it plays into, a little bit of the player's wants and needs. Because, don't get me wrong, I like cosmetics. Gotta have a cool-looking player if you're gonna play the game.
Yeah, and I think it also helps for us that don't like subscriptions. I mean, it's kind of hard to justify a $15 a month payment to, go back to World of Warcraft. When you have Destiny, which you paid that up front, and they're playing it as an MMO, and they're playing it to where they want you to continue to play it. But to provide that continual support, that continual income to support their engineers, their developers, their troubleshooters, etc., that helps them. Yes, it does create extra cash flow to them, but so far it's been successful. I mean, Blizzard makes bank off of it. Now Destiny's making bank off it. Heck, I spent $15 the other day just to get my couple dance moves.
So I spent like $10 a couple of nights ago in Destiny just to picked up, what are the new boxes called? The
Sterling Treasures?
Sterling Treasures, yes. I picked up like 2 or 3 of them. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Granted, Destiny, much different model. I like what they're doing with the game. Sell it as an MMO. Go grind the game, and I think the grinding of the game, because of the visual features, the story, the action that you get in the game, it's not a grind to me. Now, the mission that we've been playing that was 3-week long, gotta go get this taken lord that we'd have him down to almost dead and then he disappeared. That kind of grind's frustrating. But outside of that, I think a game model that you pay upfront for, and then within the game they subsidize those funds from some in-game content that you can buy for cosmetics, ships, weapons, stuff like that, I think that is a very smart thing to do, especially with what Destiny did. They're subsidizing those funds with in-game content to pay for the next updates that come out, to pay their people. I think that kind of stuff is very smart. Now, the games that go gouge you, that you pay by months to go be a part of, that kind of stuff drives me nuts.
Yeah, and going back to World of Warcraft, because it still has its subscription base, but then it also has its own paid market where you can go and you can buy pets, you can buy mounts. I think you can buy a couple other cosmetic things on there, but they have both systems on there. And I think that's really where it took off. They weren't the first ones to start it, but they were the first ones to do it on a major scale.
Yeah, they definitely were. Now, I haven't played WoW in years. It never was one of my favorite games, but it was fun. I had a few people that I ran with in a clan, but you know me, my fan base comes from Lord of the Rings and the medieval style games. So, and Lord of the Rings took that. They've got their subscription base, so you've got your VIP players that still pay in. There's a ton of them, but they've got the free-to-play mode as well. Premium players who at one time were VIP have bought content but don't pay into the subscription anymore. They get a little more access to things in the game. Whereas free-to-play, it's not even free-to-play, it's pay-to-play. So you pay for the content expansions, quest packs, things like that. So that's where almost a 10-year-old game now is making its money.
Yeah, it's all the different models of where they want to go, how they're going to make their money, and what we as gamers enable them to do. People gripe and complain about the microtransactions, and you know what? Some companies do rip people off. They have the pay-to-win systems in some games. Most of those fall flat on their face because people get so frustrated at them. They probably make a little cash on them, but it's those that slip it in as kind of like a bonus. Yeah. Cosmetics. You get the marketplace. You can buy extra stuff that doesn't affect for those competitive games. It doesn't affect your competitiveness against another player, or doesn't affect your stats in game. It'll affect your looks. It'll affect your dance moves, whatever it may be.
Absolutely, and I think that's definitely important. Like you said, it doesn't affect the player's stats or anything like that. Now, does it create a level of competitiveness? To a degree. I think there are some people out there, me not being one of them. Again, I like the gameplay and the stories a lot better. If a game doesn't have a story, forget it. I'm probably not going to play it at all. But if it's got some type of story that goes along with it, then yeah, you've pretty much caught my attention. But there are people out there who pay in to play games specifically for their cosmetic systems and their role-playing systems. And I think there's some competitiveness that goes on that scale as well.
That does bring in a good point, and I haven't thought about that before, is for those that do the role play, and all of a sudden, you've been trying to grind to get this really awesome set of armor, this really awesome sword to go along with your role play that you're trying to do in game of whoever heroic or bad character you're trying to play at, and somebody pops in, spends $20 and gets a really fancy set of armor that looks really awesome and is about the same thing, and you've been sitting here grinding for 3 months and only have 4 pieces of the 10-piece set.
It can be frustrating, yes, but that's the thing, is they're not in it to have the gear to go grind these big missions with or do raids. They want it purely for looks, so that so the game that I play, Lord of the Rings, is the only big MMO that I've got right now that's PC based. There are literal just music groups. When I say music groups, I mean music groups, like actual people that get together that have formed bands. There's an amazing music system inside Lord of the Rings. They write their own tab music for these songs. They have a word and lyric system that they've programmed that you can write your own lyrics and it pops up on the screen and plays along with the song. I'm talking role-playing to like a next-level degree for this thing. So, anyways, they found this big iconic location out in Middle-earth and invited a ton of people, and they crashed the server. They had so many people log in for it.
Wow.
Yeah, took it down. But the pictures that I got to see, we were talking hundreds of people inside an MMO all gathered around to watch these bands that came out and signed up to come out and play different songs. There was everything from AC/DC style songs to your old 1950s, your pop modern, and then they had your classic kind of, war-driven epic music that you'd see inside of a Lord of the Rings. But these bands get together, and it's made up of hobbits and dwarves and elves, and they all got matching costumes, and they put plays on, and they shoot fireworks off, and that's all they do in the game. They'll come do these events, and you won't see them for 5 months, because that's all they do. Outside of that is they plan for next event. They've never played the game.
See, and each to their own. I mean, if you're getting a kick out of that, playing in the game where you're part of this, you're basically role-playing as a bard, have your own band going through, all power to you. You've made the game more entertaining for me as a gamer, which is running through a raid. I'm going in between instances, and I stop by, and I kind of sit down and watch this band play. Brightens my day, and I continue on. And probably have a better strike because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a couple of turns inside one of the kinships that I'm part of. He does some role-playing. Every once in a while, I'll go join up. Our kinship's got a band that they host events with. I'm not as hardcore as what these guys do. They actually do some pretty big events, so I'll go play with them every once in a while. Yeah, it's funny to watch the different communities, the way the games bring these communities up. You got your role players that actually go and act certain scenes from say, an event, they create their own scripts, they read them out, they play. They've got, your raiders. That's all they do. They get on, they go grind these big events. You've got people that are story-based. That's all they want to do is just, they want to hit the story, they want to know about it, they want to play it, they could care less about rating, they could care less about grouping. It's kind of a big community and sometimes a big family when you get in there. It's kind of neat to see some of the conversations that happen inside these clans and kinships.
You stated right. I mean, sometimes it's like one big family where you get on and, I mean, they're even asking about, supporting each other personally in real life. They get into it so much. And they could be thousands of miles away and still have that connection between the group.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I don't remember the guy's name, but he's a frequent Lord of the Rings player. These two had never met. They never got the chance to meet. It was a pretty cool story. It's out on YouTube somewhere. They met in-game. They got to do, some video chats and a couple of videos of them actually like going and doing a raid together. But they actually started a relationship with each other, but unfortunately, financially, they never had the money to come and actually see each other. Kind of a sad story. She ended up passing away. He never got to meet her. So he ended up writing a letter to the headquarters, and they had kind of a big ceremony that was actually, it took place in the game. Kins from all over the server joined in and became part of it. It was strange, but cool in the same way.
Basically, every bit game out there has had its own event of some type where, somebody in real life had formed a connection either to a guild, a clan, whatever it may be, and something happened to that person or some, tragic event, whatever it may be, happened, and the developers get word of that, and they create something. Or even some monumental life decision. For example, Portal. There was a couple that the wife loved Portal. Or, no, the guy loved Portal, and he was wanting to propose to his wife. Or then girlfriend. So he got a hold of the developers, asked them, if he could help. They helped him build a level in Portal, and even was able to reach out and get the voicing of GLaDOS of Portal in the game.
That's awesome.
For this little mini level, and he had his then girlfriend play through it at the very end in a very GLaDOS tone and terminology. He asked her to marry him. Wow. It was really cool. I think you can find it out on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, it's stories like that. This plays a lot into what we were talking about a couple of days ago, the relationships that are formed because of gaming. I don't know, I've always found that piece intriguing. Ever since, my first gaming console, all the way up through, it's created fellowship, it's created, bonding time with people, friendships, chances to go out and meet different people. So, yeah, I think a lot of people look at gaming and they say, yeah, it's bad for your brain. Well, yeah, if you sit around and play it 24/7, it becomes, a complete addiction. Of course it will. It's just like anything. But I think in instances like this, you get some friends together, you get some people that you've never known together, you go do something that's fun, have some enjoyment. I think that's probably the best part about gaming is you never know who you're going to meet, you never know what you're going to be able to talk about, what you're going to get to do.
Yeah, and it goes into all gamers across the world. We all have an instant kinship with one another in that we love games, whatever it may be. Right. You're a Minecraft person? Great. You're a Dark Souls person? Great. You just like playing retro games? Fantastic. You like playing music? Great. We all love playing video games. And it's all based on, those that got us going and got us established in that.
So, being established in gaming, what was the very first game you ever got to play?
Oh, see, I was thinking about that this last couple weeks. What was the first game that I remember playing? And I would have to say the original Mario on the NES was the first game. Because that was the first console that I was able to play. Right. Albeit the NES broke a little bit soon after that, but that was the first game I got to play. And I wouldn't say it's the one that got me hooked. That was the one that got me introduced to the console gaming. From there, I think I took the jump right to the Super Nintendo and probably one of my favorite games of all times, The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past.
Yeah, one of the best games ever on the face of this earth.
I was hard pressed to find somebody that didn't, if they played that game, didn't enjoy it. Albeit, I did not beat it at the time. I did not beat it while it was originally on the Super Nintendo, and it only took me about, 15 years later before I emulated it on my computer and was like, I'm going to beat this game.
I didn't beat it when I was a kid either, and like you, I didn't beat it until I got it on an emulator years ago, which is funny. I think the very first system that I ever got the chance to play on, the very first one I remember in the house, was a Commodore 64, basically an Atari, and it was Pong. A little white ball, a couple of lines on the side of the screen, it goes, boing,
Yeah.
boing. That was the very first video game I ever got to play. It wasn't until Mario, and I think probably the game that got me hooked was Sonic the Hedgehog.
So, which Sonic are we talking about?
Talking the original came out for Sega. The very first Sonic the Hedgehog that was ever created.
I think I played that one. There was one I got on PC that I just kept playing and kept playing and kept playing. I'm pretty sure it was the original Sonic. It was that side-scrolling 8-bit one, wasn't it?
Yeah, the original platformer. That was the very first real console game that I got to play. It was full color. You got to see a character, that you got to kind of see a story that went along with what you were doing. Soon after that, of course, the Super Nintendo was released, and you had Mario 3 that came out, so you had the raccoon tail that you could get.
Yep.
Of course, that was like my all-time favorite game when it first came out. I was always a huge role-playing, loved the RPGs. Zelda, couldn't go wrong with Zelda. It was blasted hard back in the day, and sometimes complicated, confusing. Got this blob on the screen, you have no idea what the heck you're supposed to do with it. I loved what they did with Zelda. I think they morphed the game really well. I think those couple of games, again, we're talking retro 8-bit, Sega Genesis, Nintendo Entertainment Center. Those are really what got me to enjoy games from an aspect of, it wasn't just a game, it wasn't just something to go play, it was basically art to me. I grew up in a very artistic family. My brother and sister were artists. They painted, they drew, they were extremely good. I grew up in that same mentality. The graphics arts background. So to me, gaming wasn't just something to sit down and mind-numbingly go do. It was something that was art to me. How to draw those characters, how to program, how to make that world come alive for the person that was playing it so that they could actually enjoy something that was not just fun, but they could actually enjoy in a level of story and become part of it. That's what was fun to me.
Yeah, I think it didn't start until I got to, my main console was a Super Nintendo. I don't think the story part of my enjoying story of gaming had started yet, but when you talk about games like Yoshi's Island, Donkey Kong Country, and the Donkey Kong Country series, I played those so much, especially Donkey Kong Country 1 and 3. I don't think I had 2 for very long before I got rid of the Super Nintendo, but I played 1 and 3 a whole lot. And in those games, you have a collection system. Now, very early on, I had an OCD to where I have to collect everything. Completionist. So, in those games, after you get through the initial one, you can go back and you collect things to complete out the game. It's an extra challenge to it. And, playing through the Super Nintendo era, you didn't have walkthroughs, you didn't have YouTube. I even got to a point where I think it was during the N64 era that I had a folder. And it was just when we were able to get dial-up internet, I had a folder of all walkthroughs that I printed off from online. If there was a cheat code list, I had that printed off. I had it labeled by system that I had it labeled in alphabetical order, and it was a pretty thick binder. And then YouTube came out. It's like, well, I don't need that anymore. Goodbye. Another one, Mega Man X. That was another one where you can collect stuff. You make yourself. I didn't play any of the other ones before or after, but Mega Man X was the one I just played over and over and over. Especially when I figured out, you can find extra tanks, you can find extra missiles to power you up, you can do all this. And so I was I popped into a map and I was all over it looking for stuff. And there was an enjoyment in that. Goes back into one game that I really wonder if I would enjoy it if it came out today, even with good graphics, updated graphics, Donkey Kong 64. Donkey Kong 64, when I think about it, my memory of it was fantastic. And even now, I can pick up the game, I can plug in an N64 controller into my computer, and I can play it, and I have a good time. But I think that's because of nostalgia. I'm reliving my childhood through the game.
That's the only thing that I can remember, too. Playing games on emulators now, even playing with my kids and sitting down with the wife, we'll look at old games that we used to play like that. Got a couple of CDs. It's just a big collage of old games from the day. My kids have never seen them before, and they look at it and they're like, "Dad, what is this? Oh, I've never seen this before." And of course, me and the wife were like, "Oh, this is such a great game!" Playing old games, for instance, Mario Kart. Mario Kart, come on, one of the best racing games ever. But sitting down and playing a game like that now, say 15 years later, you look back when you were 10, 11 years old, and I have just as much fun now because of those memories that I had when I was a kid, because I get to relive that. I think if those games were available now and I had never experienced them, I'd look at them and go, "Nah, never mind. This is boring."
Well, yeah, go talk about Donkey Kong 64. The game has a very non-complicated story. The worlds are very colorful, they're very dynamic, but it's really one big collection fest. That's all it is. It compares right to, Super Mario 64, in that you go through Super Mario, you collect stars. Collect stars, you unlock new levels. Fight Bowser, you win the game, save the princess.
Great story. It's got a ton of stuff that's fun in it. What I didn't like about the game, though, is their control system that they had. Again, we're on the edge of 3D graphics and still trying to learn how to move within that 3D world, and I just didn't enjoy it. Still Mario, still a great story, still a great character. I just didn't enjoy that version of him.
Yeah, well, entering the 3D realm, it's hard. People were still trying to get a hold of the camera angles and how we were supposed to work with that. Trident of Power, that was the N64 controller, and having to deal with one analog stick and your C stick and how you move the camera. Same thing. Yeah, I mean, whoever used the D-pad, I mean, that kind of just sat over there, did look like a D-pad. That was it. We could go on and on about that controller, but you know what? When we had it at the time, it was awesome. Never had any bad thoughts about it until I look back, after I've handled the multiple new generation controllers, how they somewhat perfectly fit to your hands now, hold your hands where they don't get tired, they're not meet together. You have dual analog technology. It's the advanced
technology. The way it's advanced, of course, it's going to continue to advance as fast as the market is growing. I think the retro gaming area is never going to go away because we've got, again, that was the booming era of gaming. Not that we're not in an era where gaming is booming, but that was kind of the forefront of all these classical characters that we know today. Kids parent that these kids are playing Halo and Destiny and all these different games that we've got nowadays. Their parents played Mario and Zelda and all these others. So those are the games that have paved the way to have the technology that we get to see today. I think the best thing about retro gaming is it's exactly that. It's retro. It's like classical music. It's like classical cars. And that's the way I've always viewed it. You've got gearheads who just drool over every second of being able to see a favorite old classic car. I'm that way when it comes to an old classic game. Some of my favorites, you look at Zelda, you look at Mario. One of my favorite games of all time, GoldenEye, Nintendo 64.
Yep.
One of the best first-person shooters ever made.
Dang you, those that played it, oddball. Dang you.
And it's like that classic car. You may not get to play it, you may not get to drive it very often, but when you do see it, it's a sweet experience because it brings back those memories. And, some of the fond memories that I had growing up as a kid, me and my brother, competition was through the roof. It didn't matter if we were playing games, it didn't matter if we were playing cards, if we were and anytime we were sitting playing video games, we had what we called the pumpkin chair. We had the pumpkin chair and the recliner, and we always fought over who would get which chair. We'd sit down and play Mortal Kombat when it first came out, right? So we're completely competitive. I mean, we're elbowing, we're punching each other, we're kicking each other, and we're trying to fight in the middle of the game. Yeah, those are great memories, and those have come along with me as I've gotten older. And now I get to see that between me and my wife and my kids. And it's cool stuff to experience with them now and talk about it later on about what and how did that relationship between me and my brother, my sister, and the friends that I had back in the day, how has that formed my opinions that have come into this time frame? It's made me who I am. If I hadn't experienced that with my brother, or some of the game systems that I got to have when I was a kid, maybe some of those relationships that I got to experience with the friends that I had, I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have had them. They just would have been different.
Yeah, it goes back to, it's hard to say, but Halo 2 is nostalgia for me. That was probably the most played game at the LAN parties I'd go to. The most played. We'd spend 13 hours on an overnight LAN party playing Halo 2 over and over and over again. Competitive, play teams, go through it. It was kind of a eye-opener when I think about it, and I was like, wow, Halo 2, that could be in our nostalgia talk. That's a little scary.
It's an old game.
It is.
Our favorite game was Quake 3 Arena.
Yeah, I went to a couple, it was more modern computer LAN party, and the one we played was Quake. It was kind of fantastic because everybody had these really powerful computers that could play really high-end graphics. We're all playing Quake 3.
So back when we had our LAN parties, we'd get 10, 15, 20 dudes over at somebody's house, and we're talking high school area, so we're like the ages of 16, 17-ish, somewhere right in there, and we'd just make a weekend out of big gaming events like this. We'd get everybody's computers set up on desks, and this was back in the day when CRT monitors were like the size of a kitchen table,
mm-hmm.
and your computer was about double the size of a kitchen table. It took like 4 guys to lug this machine into the house, and it took a generator to power everything that was going on in the house. And it raised the temperature in the house to like 93, air conditioning, all the windows are open. The house reeked, smelled like a bunch of BO rank dudes, snacks in every corner, you name it. It was, why we thought that was fun, I don't know. Looking back at that now, at the age I am. But again, it's that nostalgic memory, the friendships that we had, the times that we got to experience and have with each other.
That goes into, I think we don't consciously think about how we're trading new games that come out compared to the memories that we had of the old games. You have those that are going on now, 7, 10, 12 generations of the same type of storyline. Mario comes to mind, Zelda comes to mind, Final Fantasy comes to mind. Great point bringing up Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 7, the one everybody's hyped about to come out at high resolution, remastered edition. And they really are. They're remastering it. But every Final Fantasy between when that one came out to now when it's coming out remastered, they've always judged it against that one. Valid so. It was a great game. Great game. But I think some of the criticism to the others wasn't warranted because of how much memories we had of Final Fantasy 7, of your Mario games, of your Donkey Kong games, etc. And now when new games come out, by themselves, if you had no history of the game, if you put it in front of somebody that hadn't played a Donkey Kong game or Mario game or Final Fantasy game before then, would probably give it a lot higher review than those that actually had played it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to personal perspective and personal preference on gaming. One game that I like, something that I played 10 years ago, I pick it up now and have the same enjoyment. Somebody else that's never seen it comes in and it's like a disgust to them because, it doesn't hold up to any standards of what they've seen or the memories that they have now. But I also like your point saying, I think the games that we have now, is there that same fellowship and same camaraderie that goes into the gaming now? I think there is. It's different. Before, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have connections to be able to log in and, hook up with 5, 6, 7 different friends and go run a raid in Destiny. That just didn't exist. You had to actually physically be there with the person. So that in itself made gaming a lot different than what we have now. Take Mario Kart, for instance. If you wanted to go race with somebody, you had to have 3 other friends there to hook up 4 controllers and go race with them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Was it fun? Heck yeah, it was. You steal the other person's controller while they're going around a corner? Sure. Unplug it while they're right. Absolutely. A lot of fun. Now you're like, hey, are you online? Yeah, I'm online. You want to play a game? Sure. You have this banter over the online. It just wasn't the same. It's like holding a basketball and shooting the basketball versus playing it on a video game. Two completely different things. You know, somebody who's got a love for that basketball that likes to go play may not like to play a basketball video game because it doesn't do the same thing for them. They don't physically get to hold it.
Or it could be that just they either one side or the other. They're really good at playing basketball out at, you know, they can dunk it, they can dribble it, whatever. Then they get to the game and they're just like, all right, dribble out. But you're absolutely right. You know, those experiences, they're different. If you try at it and you're wanting to build that social aspect, you have to go about it differently. And in some aspects, they're stronger. I think they're stronger because of the distances that we have, the, using the word, animosity that you have. You know, you're talking to a person and usually you're talking about their gamer tag, but you get into it and you talk with them and you build a relationship with them before they even have to know anything about you. You know, you talk about it, you're building the friendship with them, and all of a sudden you have a group that you're always hanging out with online, and then all of a sudden that builds into more. You know, it runs from there, whereas beforehand you already had the friendship built, then you started the gaming.
Yeah, I think, you know, the games that we've got at hand now, like you said, having that relationship, does it help? Yes, but the social experience that we've got now from a net standpoint, you look at Twitch, you look at YouTube, you look at the big streaming companies that we've got out there, and the way gamers connect with audiences, in a way they do know them, but they don't.
Yes.
And personally for me, with everything that we have nowadays, the technology is fantastic, but again, I want to keep, you know, my family, myself, and others that I know safe, so I don't give my real name. I don't give all that information. So, you know, I use those gamer tags for a reason. But again, it's a very cool community to go out and talk and chat and have these virtual friendships with these people that maybe you'll never meet on the face of the earth as long as you live, but you can still have these day-to-day conversations or a conversation while you play this game because, one, you've got that main core belief and like in common, and that's gaming. And that's something that I give to every gamer no matter what. You're always going to have pretty much something to talk about. Whether you're a tabletop gamer, you're a video gamer, you're PC only, you can debate, you can have your own opinion, but you're going to have something to talk about.
Absolutely. It really strikes me odd when you go to those people that they're having a gaming conversation. You're like, oh, interesting conversation. And you make a comment about it, and they kind of snide you. It's like, okay, whatever. Didn't really want to talk about that anyway. But besides the point. Yeah. So which of your favorite games do you think has aged well?
Which of my favorite games has aged well?
Those that you first played when you were younger.
Do they still have to be active games?
No. I mean, if there's something that's online and has been discontinued, but they hold up by possibly today's standards, or if you were to go to play them, you know, even with today's graphics, they're not breaking, they still look good. Because we have games that come out today that are still 8-bit, and everybody just rants and raves about them. My
favorite game of all time is it's a RPG, so it was turn-based. It was turn-based fighting. It was a role-playing game. It was called Shining Force.
Shining Force?
Shining Force. And this is sad that you probably never played this. This was a very sad day. So Shining Force, I think, is probably one of the best turn-based role-playing games that has ever struck any console of this era. The story that they wrote for it, again, there's me being my story background. I got to have the stories. They were kind of ahead of their time when they did the turn-based strategy. It was something that the Nintendo and Super Nintendo had never seen. They only made 2 of them, but they did a fantastic job of tying the story in together. And I think the game has aged to a point where it has again, it's It's one of those lesser-known titles, but the fan base that did play it and loved the game, they kind of hold it as the creme de la creme of games, and I think that's probably why it's held up so well.
Yeah, it goes in line with... I've seen those games that are the kind of top-down RPGs, role-play games, bring up Zelda, you bring up Chrono Trigger, you bring up Shining Force. Those type of games, when they've worked out the mechanics like they have, where it's pretty seamless, and even in the time, it was very great. Great soundtrack. They included a great story. Because they've done the 8-bit so well, they've aged very well. Even when you go back and play them today, they could probably be remastered in that they increase the resolution of everything on screen and still keep that 8-bit aspect. Man, that company would make bank right now. Dude, if they were to release it.
I would go nuts if they released a Shining Force and remastered it right now. Nobody would see. I would just take like all my vacation and just sit down and be like, look, this is what I'm doing right now.
This is important stuff. This is life and death. I need to do this.
I'm reliving childhood, all right? Nothing else is important. So I'm a bit biased when it comes to that statement about that game, though. Now, if I was to just give a generalized statement about a game that I think has aged the best, in my opinion, Ninja Gaiden.
Ah, yes.
Can't beat Ryu. I'm sorry. He is the famous of famous ninjas. He's a ninja. Come on, what else beats a ninja? Nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that game, it kind of precedes itself. The old games were extremely hard. The new games that they made were bonkers insane hard. I mean, to the point of frustration. I think that's a little bit detriment to that series. They did make the games a tad bit complicated for people that have probably never played them from an old standpoint before. And I think that probably ruined some of the nostalgia feel for some of the oldies that liked that game series. But overall, I think the game has held up very well.
Yeah, I would agree with that point. And bring up another point that I think helped us back then that is not helping us now is that older games, they didn't have an easy mode. You had the game. You had the game, and you were stuck with it, and you played through it. You didn't have to go, oh, this is hard, so I'm going to drop down the difficulty for this mission or so.
We're going to do, like, light level 220 tonight. We're not going to do level 3. Yeah, you didn't have none of that.
So. No. You had to go through it, and you had to beat it. If you couldn't beat it, well, that's on you. You either had, like I had to do sometimes on the original games, like, I could not beat this level for the life of me. So I had a friend over, he's like, yeah, all you got to do is do this. And I handed him the controller, and he beat it for me. I'll be able to take a little bit of enjoyment out of it, but I was pretty frustrated at that point, to the point of not playing the game anymore. I just wanted to get through that level, just get through it.
That's one of those moments where you look at the screen and you turn the game system off and you refuse to play it any longer.
Yes. Yeah.
I need to get rid of this system. We're going to sell it. Games are no longer fun. And then somebody who's better at it comes along and they're like, what's so hard about this? They're like, doot, done.
Yep. I had several of those moments, and it'd be those times where you just, you've been frustrated for days trying to beat them. One of them I remember specifically, there was a certain race in Diddy Kong Racing N64, could not beat it. It was like a timed race or something. I could not get in first place. Over and over and over. So I stopped playing it. I didn't play that game for several months. And I got sick one day, so I stayed home from school, and I was like, what the heck? Gonna try it again. Beat it first time. It's like, really?
One of the most frustrating gaming moments ever of gaming history for me, Earthworm Jim.
Yes.
It was I don't know if I can call it good or not. It frustrated me to the point that I told myself I was going to beat the game, just being spiteful to the game company that created this monstrosity. Again, it came out when I was like 10, so like you stay home when you're sick from school, or, suck up an onion and, oh, Mom, I can't go to school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I spent like hours playing levels in Earthworm Jim, and I don't know why. It was one of those awful, awful, awful games that was fun.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but it's one of those has now become a cult classic. It's so bad, everybody knows about it, and we play it because of it.
Dude, he's an earthworm that carries around freaking Uzis and has a propeller on his head and flies around and shoots bad guys. Come on.
Well, the propeller is his head.
Yeah, just don't be technical.
Yeah. Man. The memories. The memories.
Oh,
right?
the memories.
Oh, the memories.
Speaking of the memories, since we're talking about retro gaming, I did a little research and looked up some old gaming systems. Like, old beyond old. The Magnavox Odyssey. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I have.
It says it was the very first game console ever released, predating even Pong for the Atari.
Wow. But it doesn't get credit for it, I think, because I don't think it was mass-produced like the Pong was. I think people equate it with Pong because of its success.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So the games that came out for it, it was pretty lackluster because it was just black and white. And the Atari had that beat because it did have some color.
Mm-hmm.
And it only sold about 300,000 units. So, again, there's some pretty crazy old systems out here. Granted, the Atari's kind of the big famous one that hit the market. Remember when Atari tried to make the big comeback around the early 90s with their Atari Jaguar, their 64-bit system, which really wasn't 64-bit. They tried to add 24-bit and 16-bit and say it was 64-bit. They're like, hey, it's a gaming system, and it was CD-based. Ooh, look what we can do. Yeah, it failed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think all these systems, again, these companies that have led up to this, the failure of the Atari, you look back at the 3DO. 3DO, I mean, we were talking like the big, I think it was a Panasonic system. Yeah, Panasonic 3DO, if I remember right. Anyways, this sucker started at like $750. And it had 4 or 5 games. And they were CD-based, and it was awful. But again, it was one of those companies that kind of brought the gaming era from the cartridge, talking retro 8-bit, 16-bit era. Have to plug the gaming cartridge into the top to, oh, look what we got now. We got CDs. We can plug these CDs in and drop them in, and we can play games off of them.
That's what you always feel bad for those that first, they are trying to be advanced, to go out on a limb to try to be the new thing and start off with the CD, start off with the new era, and they're the first ones to hit, and it flops because people aren't used to it. People are used to their cartridges. People are used to. That's why N64 held on for so long, because that's what people like. People like the cartridges. I have fond memories and some bad memories of cartridge not working. Gotta blow on it.
Yep, gotta blow on it, gotta turn it upside down, shake it a little bit.
Yeah. That never did. Never did. But it did work that 1 of 1,000 times. It did. So you think you have to do it every single time?
Absolutely. It was the one master of fix-all for all cartridge systems. It didn't matter whether you had a Nintendo or a Sega.
Yep.
And there's still the great retro battle of which one was better. That's for another episode, though.
Another episode.
That could be a multi-episode for the next 2 years.
And it still wouldn't be resolved.
Wouldn't be resolved.
Yep. But thank you all for being with us as we travel down memory lane. Talk about nostalgia. Does it affect our current views of games? And how we review them. Do we need to always take that into effect when we look at new games?
Yeah, we hope you guys have really enjoyed this episode. It's been a lot of fun for us to take that look back at our childhood. Again, it's a couple of geeks. We've been able to enjoy our time as friends, and we hope hope to continue making these episodes better and better each time we get together. This one was a lot of fun for us because we got to experience some of these games that we talked about in a form and fashion that still gives us pleasure, still gives us enjoyment, and that's why we do this podcast. It's a passion of ours, and we want to continue bringing that for our listeners. So guys, thank you so much for supporting us. Thank you again for joining in on this session.
Thumbs up, give us a like, follow us on Twitter. We post every day. Some like to retweet a lot more than others, but anyway, thanks guys for listening. Peace out.